This is a very interesting case about entering or not a market. So it's about an European company that's thinking about starting selling their products in China. Now you see that this candidate did a good job, even though the conclusion, the recommendation that she got at the end was not the one in the suggested approach of PrepLounge, but that doesn't mean that it was not good, because the suggested approach is just a suggestion, as the name says. But the nice thing about this candidate is that she justified really well her conclusion. You're going to see at the end of the case. One thing that this candidate could have done better is to be more concise. You're going to see that her structure will take about 10 minutes through the case to be explained, and then she has to hurry a bit, and she gets a bit lost and switches from topic to topic of her structure instead of going down customers or company and understanding everything she needs and then switching gears. She goes from subject to subject too often. So that's something she could have done better. Now we're gonna start the case, since we already talked about a bit about your personal fit interview and some questions. We're gonna go to the case, which is called Nutripremium.
All right.
So your client is Nutripremium, and they are a very well-known premium nutrition food company in Europe. They make 1 billion euros revenue per year. Well, that was last year. The company is based in Spain, right? And they have an excellent market share, not only in their home country, but also in Portugal, France, Italy, and Germany.
All right.
So Nutripremium, they have two main lines of products. One is targeted at pregnant women,
yes,
because they need supplements, right, during pregnancy. And the other line is concentrated dehydrated elements and vitamin pills for sick patients.
Okay.
And the sicknesses are more specifically diabetes or cancer.
All right. All right.
So the CEO of Nutripremium thinks the market in Europe is starting to get saturated, and they want you, or the CEO wants you to analyze the Chinese market, right?
Okay.
To understand if it would make sense to start something there. What would be the key areas you would explore to determine whether this is a good idea or not?
All right. So just to make sure that I understood the case correctly,
Sure.
Our client is Nutripremium, is a food manufacturer based in Spain with a revenue of $1 billion per year.
Euros. We're talking about euros here.
Euro, okay. And it was a revenue or a profit of?
That was revenues.
Was revenue. Okay. And so our client is producing high quality food for the local market, for Portugal, France, Italy, and Germany. And we've basically two product lines, one that is targeted for pregnant women and the other one for sick patients. And the question our client wants us to investigate on is whether or not it's a good idea to enter the Chinese market, since the market in Europe is struggling or currently flat. Is that correct?
That's correct. So the market is kind of stagnated, and yeah.
All right.
That's right.
Interesting. Okay, may I take a second to structure my thoughts?
Sure, take your time.
Okay. Before I start answering the question, may I ask some clarifying questions first?
Sure,
Okay.
definitely.
You said that the main market they're currently operating in is South and Mid Europe. And my question is the only reason for their consideration of the Chinese market entry the stagnated market in Europe, or is there any other are there any other
Reasons for
background?
that? Yeah, that's pretty much it. So the market is stagnated, and there are also other competitors, and yeah, so when the company is not making as much money as in the past, so they're looking for new challenges or new markets where they could enter.
Okay, okay, interesting. And when we are talking about two product lines, it's not only two products, but really two product segments. So our client offers a variety of products.
Right. But exactly. But let's assume, just for simplicity's sake, that there's just the line for pregnant women and the line for sick patients. You can
Okay,
think as two products, just to simplify.
all right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I think I understood it. Um,
Mm-hmm.
okay. So, in order to answer the question that our client was asking, whether or not it's a good idea to enter the Chinese market,
Mm-hmm.
I would like to look at four areas.
Okay.
I would like to look at the customers
Mm-hmm.
that are they are currently serving,
Mm-hmm.
and compare them to the customers that they will potentially have in China.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to look at the company itself, at our client, and see about their capabilities and skills, whether the company is actually able to do such a market entry, whether they have enough cash to invest, whether they have the expertise, maybe they might have some Chinese employees already, or they might consider buying these skills or acquiring these skills.
Mm-hmm.
Then the third area I want to look at is the competition. I want to look at the competition that they would face in China, and in order to assess whether they have a chance to operate their business successfully in
Right.
China.
Okay.
For example, look at the cost of the competition, if they are able to compete on the cost basis, or also like at the volume and the revenue side, whether Chinese customers are actually willing to buy products from Europe, or if there's any barrier.
Okay. Interesting.
And then the fourth area I want to investigate on would be the product itself. So we're talking about two product lines, you said. It is for pregnant women and for sick patients. So I would like to investigate on how big is the need for those products, and how well these products fit or meet the needs of the Chinese market. Are there pregnant women that actually need these supplements or would buy these supplements? And as a second question, the sick patients in the Chinese market, like diabetes or cancer, that they have diabetes or cancer, would they actually be willing to buy the product, or is there any kind of need that could be covered by our product? So those are the four areas I would like to investigate on in order to answer the question whether it would be attractive to enter the Chinese market.
All right. Good. So where would you like to start?
All right, and so beside that, that would be like the qualitative area. But since we're talking about the quantitative, you should consider the quantitative part as well. And since we're currently having a decline or flat revenues, I'd like to, in a second step, also assess the profitability and the financial attractiveness of a market entry in China. That means the profits that we could generate.
Here the candidate realizes that she spent already 1/3 of the time of the whole case only explaining her structure. So you notice that her structure was maybe a bit too long or too confused or not very concise. So at the end, I'm going to give her more than the 30 minutes that I said we would have for the case. But if I hadn't given her more time, she would be in trouble because it was already 10 minutes just for that, right? So once you start solving the case, make sure that you have your structure laid out or explained in the first 5 minutes, and after that you already start with the hypothesis, which is what the candidate does. Just in some minutes she's gonna state a hypothesis that the market entry in China is something that they should do, the client should do. Check it out.
From the market entry. And so I would like to investigate on the cost that would be caused by the market entry, and on the other side, on the revenues that will be generated in order to meet the objectives of our client.
All right, okay, good. So to recap, to make sure I understood what your structure will be. So first, there's more qualitative analysis, and you're going to do this analysis on 2 or 4 main blocks. Yes. And the second step would be a more quantitative analysis. And I assume that you're going to use data you gathered in the first qualitative part, where I'm sure you're also going to gather some numbers to make this calculation, right?
Exactly.
Okay, good. So we don't have a lot of time for this case, so we should be ready in about 20 minutes.
All right.
So where do you want to start? And please bear in mind this time constraint. So the CEO is coming in about 18 minutes to listen to your conclusion or your recommendation.
Okay. So before I would like to go deep into the analysis, my first question is, is there any other targets that the client have besides answering the question whether a market entry is attractive or not in terms of revenue or profit development? Since you said that the market is stagnated, does that mean that the client actually is looking for an increase in either profits or revenue?
Yeah, exactly. Good point. So they did not specify clear objectives or targets. So they want to know, in broad terms, in general terms, whether it would be profitable, whether it would improve a lot of the conditions today or the profits or revenues today.
All right. Okay, so interesting. So knowing that, since we established 2 parts of the analysis, first a qualitative and then a more financial one, I would actually, to have some hard facts, I would actually like to start with a financial analysis first. Okay. And see in terms of profits whether entry into the Chinese market would be a good idea. So my hypothesis is that yes, it would be profitable to enter the Chinese market, and I would like to test this hypothesis.
Okay.
And so profit is made up out of revenues and costs. So do we have any forecast or any idea about the revenues that could be generated by entering the Chinese market? So do we have any prices or volumes?
So you as the consultant here should be able to tell me first what the size of the whole market is for those products.
All right.
Okay. And then we can analyze how how big a market share of this market we could grab. And yeah, for that you would also have to tell me what factors would influence how much of this whole market we could grab.
All right.
So let's start. So as I said, there are two markets we're talking about. So let's start with the pregnant women market.
Okay.
How would you estimate the market for this product?
All right. That's an interesting question. Okay, so in order to estimate the revenues that will be generated by the product line for pregnant women, I would go as follows. I would try to estimate the number of women that are currently pregnant in China.
Here you're gonna notice that the candidate uses another strategy or another way to estimate how many pregnant women there are in China. And on PrepLounge we always have a suggested approach, which you can see here in the video. And you don't need to use the suggested approach to solve the case well. You're gonna see that she uses a very interesting way to estimate how many pregnant women there are in China as well. So it's a suggested approach. It doesn't mean that it's the only right one, but it's at least a way that you as an interviewer, you can have a something to refer to, something you know is a possible solution for the case.
And then the fraction of those pregnant women that will actually buy our product.
Okay.
And then multiply that times the price that they're willing to pay for one of our products.
Okay.
Like at the total revenues that could be generated by the pregnant product line in China. And so I would like to start with the number of pregnant women that they currently have in China. I would like to break this down and look at the population, the overall population in China.
How much is the population of China, or how many people?
I would estimate, I'm not exactly sure about this, to be honest. I know that the US has 300 million, and I know that the Chinese population is much, much bigger. It's 5 times as big as
yeah, that's a good approximation. So assume it to be 1.5 billion.
Exactly. That was my guess. It's about 1.5 billion, like 5 times the US population estimate. And then I would estimate that 50% of this population is female.
Right.
It's like 750 million people. And now, as we said, we want to arrive at the number of pregnant women. So we have 750 million women in China. And
okay, so there's 750 million women.
Yes.
How many of those are at the moment pregnant?
That's a good question. I would guess that on average, maybe each of those, in order to know that, I could try to estimate how many babies are born per year, since the revenues we're trying to estimate is a per year number. And then what we want to know is that the number of women that are pregnant per year. And in order to know that, I would try to estimate the number of babies that are actually born every year in China.
Okay,
and so if I have this number, Mm.
Then you're gonna assume that the same amount of women have to have been pregnant to give birth to a baby. Okay, good.
Yeah, yes.
So let's hurry up.
Okay. So,
Let me help you out because otherwise we're gonna run out of time here. So you can assume there are 15 million pregnant women at a given time in China.
okay. And out of these 50 million,
15, sorry, 15, yeah.
all right. So now we would have to estimate the percentage of women. I know we're talking about the overall market or the market that we could capture.
We're talking about the overall market, right?
Right. So we don't estimate any market share. We would just multiply these 15 million pregnant women times the number of products they would buy per year times the price of one product.
So we assume that the price of the product times the number of products, the total amount of money they spend is 150 euros per year.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. To arrive at the overall revenues, I'm going to multiply those two numbers. 15 times 150 euro.
So yeah, just continue with your calculation. I'll make a comment.
So I will arrive at 2.25 billion revenues as a revenue potential for the segment of pregnant women in China.
Yeah, just one important remark is that only 10% of those pregnant women consume those special nutrition foods. So the overall market is actually a tenth of that.
Okay, I see. So I would arrive at 225 million euro market for the pregnant product line in China.
Okay, good. So what's next?
So what would be next? We would have to estimate the sixth segment in a similar way.
Yeah, so for us to gain some time here, the overall market would be 660 million euros per year.
All right. So I have 225 million euro and 660 million euro as revenues for the overall market for those two product lines in China. So as the next step, we would like to know which could be the market share that we would be able to capture out of those overall revenues.
Very good question. So what do you think are the drivers for us to calculate how much market share out of this 100% we can grab? What do you think influences?
Yes, that's a good point. I think the main drivers that would influence our market share are, of course, the segmentation of the competitors at this time. Are there any, whether they're main players, big players, and we will have some difficulties in entering the market?
Sure. Let me share with you an overview of the competition environment, the competitive landscape. So
Okay.
you can see that there are 3 main players and the rest is fragmented.
Okay.
What else can you extract or can you conclude out of this exhibit?
All right. So it looks like the market divided, as you said, into 3 main competitors that have high market shares, 20%, 25%, and 45%. So I assume that since there are only three big players, it looks like an oligopoly, oligopoly market. There are three main players, so I assume that they have some economies of scale that is difficult for new market entrants to meet, like to compete with them on a cost basis, on a volume basis. And so there's 10% that are others that I assume they're smaller than those main players. And my assumption or my concern is that if we enter the market, we would only be able to capture market share out of those 10% of the market, since we would not be able to compete with the established market.
Okay, interesting. Okay, so that's the competitive overview that you just analyzed. What else do you think would be key for us to understand or to estimate how much of the market we can serve or have? Yeah.
In order to answer that question, I would like to look at two categories, mainly internal ones and external ones. And in order to estimate the market share, the external ones, we talked about the competition. Then I would like to talk about the customer as well, the preferences of the customer, what you might and what kind of customers there are, and whether the overall market for those products is growing. So if we consider a market entry and the market share, we should not only look at the current market share, but make forecasts for over the next 10 years and see how the overall industry is either growing, staying flat, or shrinking.
Okay, great. So I have the next exhibit for exactly that, this information you want to have. I just share with you then the projection for the increase of number of customers per year. So it's pretty much the growth that you're talking about.
Okay. Is that target market in China?
Right.
So the headline says the market for special nutrition food in China is expanding fast. And I can see that there's two categories, pregnant women and sick patients. And the yearly increase in customers for pregnant women is 25%, and the yearly increase of customers in sick patients is 15%. And we can see the average expenditure per customer for pregnant women, it's 150 euro a year, and sick patients spend double the amount. So it looks like from a profit, from a financial point of view, that the sick patients are more, since they're spending more, this market might be more attractive.
Okay, good. Now this is a good example of how not to summarize what's written or what's given by a table. So what I was expecting here from this candidate is for her to interpret the table, not only read out what's written in it, because I also have access to it, right? So what I was expecting is something in the lines of sick patients have double the average expenditure as pregnant women, even though pregnant women are growing by 2/3 faster than sick patients, so 25% as compared to 15%. It's a 66% faster increase. So consultants really use a lot of percentage to compare two things. If you say just 25% and 15% increase of customers, that's one thing. If you say that pregnant women are increasing per year by 2/3 more, that's a whole different perspective. So it has more content, it has more insights than just reading out the numbers. So now we know that the market is growing, it is attractive. We know that we only have 45% of the fragmented market that we can fight for. However, what's then still necessary to know to say we could serve a specific or a certain market share of the Chinese market?
We would have to look at the customers and their preferences and whether or not they would be willing to buy a European product. And also we would like to know if we would have any kind of competitive advantage in terms of pricing, and also if we would have either a competitive advantage or disadvantage in terms of cost, variable cost per product, so that we would have sufficient margins in order to operate profitably in the Chinese market. We'd like to look at the price and the variable cost and the customer preferences, make sure that there's actually a market for European products.
Sure. The client Nutripremium would need to change a little bit to research on some changes that would make the product in a way that the Chinese customers would like. So for that you would need some 2 million in investment for research so that the product has a Chinese taste.
All right.
That's not much. 2 million euros would be necessary for that, and then we assume that the Chinese would like the product because the product we sell already, or the client sells in Europe, is already very well sought after, so people like it.
All right. All right.
And what else do you think would be necessary then to enter the Chinese market?
I would like to look at the risks of this market entry, whether there's actually some other barriers of entry we didn't think of. We investigate on the competition, but there are also other external factors that we should consider, like the legal environment of the company, whether it is actually possible to enter, and whether, just for example, since the Chinese market is a bit difficult in those terms, whether or not there's any restrictions regarding what the government imposes on the company, whether or not they may enter, and whether there are certain conditions under which they can enter the Chinese market only. I assume that they might have to contribute to the local economy, and they might have to have like a local, like part of the product should maybe be produced in China. That would cause another investment for the company, for example. If those kind of limitations or restrictions, like from a legal perspective, are there, that would be interesting.
Okay, so the government cannot impede an external or a foreign company to invest. Actually, it's interesting for them because they're going to make more money with taxes, sure. But as you saw, they have some stakes in the companies that are already established. So you talked. So that's on the regulatory side. You talked about investment as well. Now, so what do you think would be necessary then to invest to be able to serve this market? And then we should be wrapping up because the CEO is about to arrive.
Okay. All right. So you want me to estimate the investment, the overall investment that is needed?
Yeah. So what are the possibilities to serve, to invest, or how should we, what alternatives are there to invest so that we can serve this market? Like we need to produce the product that we're gonna sell.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah. Are we assuming that this is gonna be a standalone solution? So we're not considering any partnership, any joint venture, or any acquisition. So this is gonna be a standalone investment. Is that correct?
That's a very good question. That would be a possibility, but we are assuming that we would do that on our own. Exactly. So,
all right.
No joint venture.
In order to estimate the overall investment needed to enter the Chinese market, I would like to look at the supply chain and estimate each part of it. You mentioned that R&D is going to cost 2 million to invest.
Mm-hmm.
And after developing the product, we would have to produce it. So for the production of the product, I'm assuming that we either we produce it in our home plant or we're going to build a new plant. And in terms of volume and the investment needed for the production highly depends on the volume that is produced and the area is needed as a production place. Mm-hmm. So I would take our current plant and the investment in our current plant as a reference, and then multiply it with the factor that the number of volumes that we need, would produce more in the Chinese market.
Great. So you touched on the decision that whether we produce it in our home country or in China. What do you think would then be decisive for that decision? And which one do you think would make more sense?
Okay. Advantages for a production in China might be like the cost side. Labor cost will be lower. Maybe also the distribution to the end customer, the transportation cost would be lower. However, we will have to, disadvantages would be that we will have to recruit some workforce in China. Mm-hmm. Also the overall process and to get the expertise, the production expertise, mm-hmm. and to build the plant, to establish a whole company in China, mm-hmm. would maybe have some time disadvantage. It might be quicker to just produce it in the home country. Since we are close, we have the expertise, and we mm-hmm. would be able to produce it quicker. Mm-hmm. And then another disadvantage to produce it in China would be that there is a risk that actually the quality would be mm-hmm. not the one we are currently producing.
Interesting.
That will be the main advantages or disadvantages of a production in China. One major advantage might be that the acceptance of the product and the company, also the brand, could have a positive influence of the acceptance for the brand, and
because it's made in China.
Exactly.
It's home not made. Okay, great. So interesting points you brought up. Could you please then summarize everything that you learned and come up with a suggestion for the CEO? He's coming in a second and would love to hear what you have to recommend.
All right, sure. May I take a second to structure my thoughts?
Sure. Take your time.
All right. Okay. So, Mr. CEO, we investigated on your initial question whether or not it would be a good idea for Nutripremium food to enter the Chinese market, and we came to the conclusion, to the preliminary conclusion, that yes, under certain circumstances that I will explain in the following, it should be a good idea to enter the Chinese market. If the assumptions that we made, if they hold, it would be a good idea to enter the Chinese market. Mm-hmm. And there are four major reasons for this assessment. So the first one is the overall market for product lines is growing in China. We have a 10% and a 25% growth for two product categories that we are offering. So that seems like an attractive market that is growing. Mm-hmm. The second reason is the customer and its preferences. We know that the customer would be willing to buy our product for a reasonable price, and there would be no barriers to buy our product because it's European, but we know actually with certain adjustments that we have to make for the product, it would be our product would be able to meet the expectation of the Chinese customer. Mm-hmm. The third reason is that the competition, the local competition in China, it's an oligopoly. So we have three main players where it might be difficult to compete with them. However, there's a 10% share of the market that is highly fragmented, and we would be able to assume that it would be possible to enter this market and capture part of the 10% of the overall market. And the fourth and the last reason is like the government and the supportiveness of the Chinese government. We actually found out that the government would be supportive because it would be an advantage to collect taxes for them. So the Chinese government would be supportive if we consider a market entry in China. So those are the four reasons why we think it's a good, these assumptions, it's a good idea to enter the Chinese market to deal with the stagnated market in Europe and to gain some market. And so the focus again is the market that is growing, the competition that would be able to meet the customer's preferences, that would and the support of the government. And this is why we think it's a good idea to enter the Chinese market. And then for the areas to investigate on would be the exact profit that we would be able to achieve while entering. So the exact profit per year, and then maybe on a 10-year basis, and also depending on the and then the second area would be also the risk that we take when we do market entry, and the risks that we should consider regarding quality or costs in the Chinese market.
Right, okay, great. So, how did you find the case, or how did you like the case?
I really liked the case. It was a good case. I loved the case. And yes, so the content is really, really interesting, like a market entry. Mm-hmm. And yes, so the only thing that I think I did not do very well was like I jumped around a little bit. Mm-hmm. So I set up a structure like at the beginning. First of all, I was not really sure how to structure this. Mm-hmm. And so I told you, okay, I would look for areas, and then actually I jumped to the financial part. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So it's good. And then also whenever a new question came up, I think it's the McKinsey interviewer-led style, and it was a little bit difficult for me to then jump to a new question, and I was not exactly sure whether or not I should use a new framework or whether I have to structure each single part of the case. So
very good question. So yes, I tried to make the case a bit more interviewer-led in that I guided you with questions. For instance, what do you think the size of the market for pregnant women in China is? And then yeah, I gave you some tips. How many pregnant women are there, and how much they would spend or buy, and for what price? How many products and for what price? Just an example. I think you did really well in stopping and taking time to think about the specific questions that I asked. But you're right. I thought that you jumped a bit around. Especially if we think of the structure that you mentioned at the beginning, it was a quite detailed structure with questions under the 4 areas that you wanted to look at. So, and then you started with a quantitative analysis. That's fine, but you realize that in the quantitative analysis, in order to estimate how much revenue the company would make, you realize that we need to understand a bit better what the customers are, how many customers there are they into buying those products, would they be willing to buy an European product in China, and then you also need to know how much of the market share we would be able to steal from competitors, and for that you need to know what the competitive landscape looks like, right? So that's all things that you had to cover in order to define how much revenues we would be able to make. What I would have done in your place, in your position, would be just to mention, okay, so now we are switching to the competition analysis. So here we would like to understand how the competitive landscape is structured. Is there an oligopoly or monopoly? Is there a price war going on? How are the main players structured in terms of, is the government then a stakeholder in them? Because that would be decisive for our strategic decision of entering or not. Because if the government has a lot of shares in the established players, then even though they cannot impede us to enter the Chinese market, they might create some problems in the future, or they might create some hurdles for us to grab more market share. So that would be a risk that you could have mentioned in more detail at the end. But just to address the question about the structure, I think you could have, for instance, also excluded the part of the product, or not excluded, but quickly go through it and understand, okay, what is the product? So we have 2 products. Those are for sick patients and for pregnant women. We already heard that. And then just say, okay, we understood what the product is. Now we just have to take a look at the customers, the company itself, and the competition. So just to make sure you talked about the product that you mentioned in your structure.
Okay.
Exactly. So let me go through some feedback I wrote down here. So very good rephrase, like you rephrased the problem, that was really good. You asked clarification questions, any other objectives, also well done. Then I think you took too much time explaining the structure. So I think you could have gone a bit faster and mentioned the main points, because you saw that you had to go back to each of those points again. And yeah, since you had more information about the case, you focused on the more important questions for you to prove the hypothesis that you had stated. So you mentioned a lot of things that you never had to ask, for instance, if the company has cash to invest. So in the end, you could have asked that because it's an important factor for the decision. So we need to invest in new factories, either in Spain, in the homeland, or in China. But you saw that there were so many things that you didn't have time to address all of them.
Mhm.
So it could have been a bit faster and could have gone faster to the core of the problem of the case, which is how much money we would be able to make, how much investment we would need to make this happen. And on this part, I would also like to make a remark, which is something very important that I was expecting to hear from you, is that if we have capacity to produce more products, right? So yeah, exactly. So we know that there would be some demand for that. Maybe we would be able to grab some of the fragmented market share. But can we now, with our capacity, our current capacity, could we already produce 10% of the needs of the Chinese market? If that's the case, then we wouldn't need to invest much, right? We just use the current capacity, and that would be a huge leverage for our fixed costs, right? So if you had asked that, I would have told you that we are now at 98% of our capacity, so we would need to invest in new factories. And then would be the time where you correctly mentioned the two options. Either we produce in China in the consumer geography, or we produce in our homeland or where we already have factories. And I really liked your pros and cons. Less quality of producing in China, cheaper labor, and also no need to transport. That's something you forgot to mention, or at least I didn't hear you mention. So the fact that if we produce in Spain, then we would need to ship that out to China, and you said that there would be would take more time than to send it to China, but that would also include a lot of costs, because food is something very heavy and voluminous, right? So going to the conclusion of the case, I really liked the way you mentioned that you have 4 reasons, and you numbered them 1, 2, 3, and 4. First, second, and that was really clear. That's exactly what consultants do. They like to expect what is to come. So if the clients as well, so everybody wants to know, okay, 4 reasons, nice, I know 4 things are coming. And if you say that's the first one, okay, I understand, first one, and that's exactly what you did. Would be nice if you also mention next steps at the end. So okay, we made this decision. However, if we had more time, or if we could deepen a bit our analysis, what would we look at in more detail? And that's very related to the risks as well. So what are the risks? Then that's what we would be looking at if we had more time, to make sure that those risks would not come up, or to minimize them. Yeah, so all in all, congratulations for your performance then.
Thank you. Perfect.
Okay.
Thanks for your feedback. Thank you.
You're welcome.